I moved back to my hometown of New York about 6 months ago, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. Yet with living in New York City comes one big problem: noise. Noise pollution is nearly impossible to escape in a megacity like New York. Nearly every street is riddled with impatient drivers ready to honk at the mildest inconvenience. Some neighborhoods also have to deal with elevated subways and highways, and the city hosts 2 international airports. But to many New Yorkers, all this noise is just a part of life, an inescapable fact of living here. There's this belief that a person's right to honk, rev their modified engine, or speed down the freeway next to other people's homes is just something we need to deal with. But this is not just a nuisance, and noise pollution carries with it serious health consequences. Today we're going to take a look at why cities are loud, why we shouldn't cast it aside as some inevitability, and what we can do to reduce noise pollution. In order to create silence in the city that never sleeps, we first need to ask ourselves, what makes noise? It's a simple question that we often overlook. In American cities, the main contributor to noise are vehicles and construction. Construction is self-explanatory, and there are existing methods in place to reduce noise pollution from construction. Vehicles have more flexibility when it comes to policy, but they also have more nuance. So let's investigate. The vehicles that contribute the most noise in cities are cars and trucks. In New York City, we also have elevated subways, but as any red-blooded American knows, these are the exception and not the rule. So let's focus on cars and trucks. Cars themselves don't have to be loud, but to best demonstrate this, let me take you on a trip. I'm here in Astoria Park out in Queens. This is a very active park with a lot of people coming here to relax, get away from the noise, and just have fun. But if you take a listen, you'll notice that it's actually not that loud. You can hear murmurs of people talking and having fun, but nothing annoying. So it's not actually people that make cities loud. If we step out to some of the local roads around the park, the noise does pick up a bit, but it's still not bad. Cars going at low speeds are not a major noise pollution problem. Most car engines are actually fairly quiet. Cars become noisy in 3 cases. 1, they honk or their alarm system goes off. 2, they modify their muffler or intentionally rev their engine, causing a loud roar during acceleration. And 3, the car starts exceeding 35 miles per hour. This is because the majority of the car noise actually comes from the friction between the car tire and the pavement. At 65 miles per hour for light cars, this hits about 75 decibels. However, considering that most cars in America are light trucks and SUVs, this is closer to 85 decibels. For reference, this is about the same sound a low-flying airplane makes. I gotta get off this bridge. But how much of a problem is loud noise? A lot of us treat it as a mild nuisance. It doesn't really hurt anyone in the long term, right? Well, I wish that were true. A study from Harvard Medicine showed that people living in areas of high traffic or railroad noise for a decade or longer had a higher risk of dementia and a 27% increase in risk for Alzheimer's disease. Another European study found chronic noise exposure contributed to 48,000 new cases of heart disease in Europe each year and disrupted the sleep of 6.5 million people. Both studies controlled for other variables. Another study in New York found that students that learned closer to train stations tended to fall behind on reading subjects by a full grade. So when we talk about noise mitigation, we shouldn't talk about it as some social good or decorum. Noise pollution has very real health impacts. Okay, but what can we actually do about noise pollution? Well, actually a lot, and the United States has a history of trying to curb noise pollution. But before we get into the history, I wanted to quickly thank everyone who's been supporting the channel thus far. We recently passed 2,000 subscribers, got our first super like, so I appreciate all the support. And if you're not subscribed yet, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video thus far, remember to leave it a like. Okay, let's get back to the history of noise reduction. So in the 1970s, the US did have interest in improving noise pollution at the federal level. In 1972, the Fed passed the Noise Control Act, which aimed to give the EPA the ability to research and create noise pollution standards for products at the federal level. The act also gave the EPA the rather harsh ability to prosecute violators in a criminal court rather than a civil one. This was later modified in the Quiet Communities Act of 1978, which gave the EPA the ability to conduct civil penalties as well as gave them more research and PSA responsibilities. Then in 1982, former President Ronald Reagan did what Reagan did best and defunded the EPA along with the Office of Noise Abatement and Control. The idea was that noise pollution was instead to be handled at the state and local level with state and local funding. To be clear, these acts were not repealed, they very much still do exist today. However, they've been defunded to the point where they are no longer useful. Okay, so if we have to deal with the noise pollution on the local level, what can we do? So when it comes to unnecessary noise, meaning honking or muffler modifications, there are real policies we can and have enacted. In New York State, the Sleep Act was passed that would fine individuals for modifying cars to be noisy. New York State also financed the installation of noise radars that would attempt to catch noisy vehicles without the need for police intervention. The radars have had modest success, and there are plans to expand them. I also demonstrated earlier that cars can be quiet. For example, take a look. I'm standing on Northern Boulevard right now, which is an arterial boulevard, a major boulevard here in Queens. Yet it's fairly quiet. How did they accomplish that? Simple. They set a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit on the street. Okay, next we have to deal with the honking. And the honking is bad. New Yorkers have adopted the honk as the immediate response to even an iota of inconvenience. Like, you wait even a second too long when the red light goes to green and you get a honk. This is totally anecdotal, but it really feels like honking doesn't do anything 99% of the time. There are engineering solutions that do mitigate noise pollution from cars, as well as elevated subways and airplanes. In dense cities, we should adopt noise-proofing measures to building codes. Highways should honestly be surrounded by noise barriers and walls. These exist in parts of New York City highways, but way too many obvious points do not have these. In regards to policy, I'd like to pretend that there is a solution to honking. We can have a honking ban in certain areas, but then you need deployed police officers regulating it. This is an effort that doesn't seem realistic in most of New York City. New York actually does have fines for excessive or unnecessary honking, but the programs to administer those fines are so poorly funded that they essentially are not enforced. Okay, so all of these are short-term plans. Where should we be going in the long term? The best way to reduce noise and particulate pollution from cars is really to reduce car concentration as a whole. And this really brings me to my next big solution. We need to drastically reduce the behavior of using the car for small trips around the city. I get there are situations where this is unavoidable, but most of us are perfectly capable of walking to the grocery store or to our destination. We also need to make biking for commuting and chores safer and more accessible for people. I know, there he goes again with the bikes. But in all seriousness, you look at certain places in Queens and Brooklyn, and you actually notice that biking is a preferred and cost-effective method for getting around. We should lean into this more because unlike cars, bikes are incredibly quiet. You may be saying to yourself, Tim, if you make it harder to drive around local roads, then you'll just increase congestion at highway exits, and in turn this will increase the amount of honking that takes place. And that brings me to my next point. Those urban highways, yeah, they have to go. Or they need to be severely modified such that they go underground or that they're covered on both sides. These highways are a major source of noise and particulate pollution for the local homes. At rush hour, they are a packed river of honking echoes. During the night, they are a hotspot for street racers and those that want to test out their new mufflers. They're also a major loss of public money that causes the surrounding area to be unpleasant. This is also just not getting into the nasty history behind a lot of urban highways. Unfortunately, policy around noise pollution has seen slow adoption, and this causes people to give up on cities and move to quieter pastures. But then these become the same people that speed down our urban highways, honk for no reason at red lights, and modify their car to be louder under alternative city laws. We need to start addressing noise pollution in our cities. Hey all, I know we typically ask at this point for your support through liking and subscribing, but I'd like to take a second to give a shout out to other content creators that heavily inspire me and these episodes. This episode specifically was heavily influenced by the article We Need to Do Something About Noise Pollution by Sam Deutsch. Sam runs a blog called Better Cities in which he explores different problems and potential solutions in American cities. I also want to bring some attention to Aidan Robbins. Aiden is already a pretty big content creator here on YouTube, but he primarily focuses on nature and national park documentaries. However, his video on why silence is going extinct heavily inspired this episode. I'll leave links to both of these creators in the video description. That's it for this episode. Remember to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified for future episodes. Until next time.